Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Leviticus chapter 15 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. If you've ever found the ancient texts surrounding ritual purity kind of intimidating, or let's be honest, just downright confusing, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to look strictly at the text of chapter 15, going step by step, verse by verse, to understand exactly what it says and why it says it. We are sticking to the simple meaning, the peshat, so we can really grasp the mechanics of these ancient laws.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, context. Second, men's discharges. Third, women's discharges. Fourth, clarifications and key ideas. Fifth, practical life lessons. And finally, a chapter 15 recap.
Section 1, context.
Right off the bat in verse 1, the Lord speaks directly to Moses and Aaron. Now, why both of them? Well, Moses is the leader, for sure, but Aaron is the high priest. He's the guy literally on the ground responsible for the camp's spiritual and physical state. And we really have to remember the setting here. We're talking about a massive camp, potentially millions of Israelites living side by side in tents. And right there, smack in the dead center of it all, is the tent of meeting, the literal dwelling place of God's presence. So what we're about to read in chapter 15 is a highly specific, very clinical manual dealing purely with bodily discharges and ritual impurity. But, and this is absolutely crucial to grasp up front, this is not an ancient medical textbook. We aren't diagnosing diseases here. We're looking at a strict guide for maintaining spiritual hygiene, making sure the community can safely live right next to the divine presence.
Section 2, men's discharges.
Okay, let's look at how the text breaks this down. What's really fascinating here is the clear dividing line the chapter draws for men's bodily discharges. We've got two completely distinct categories. Verses 1 through 15 handle abnormal health issues, while verses 16 through 18 deal with totally normal biological emissions. The text kicks off in verse 2, stating point blank that when any man has an unusual bodily discharge, that specific discharge makes him unclean. Verse 3 goes a step further to clarify exactly what kind of impurity we're talking about. It notes that whether his body allows the discharge to flow freely or whether it gets stopped up, he's still in a state of uncleanness. It's an ongoing abnormal health condition that triggers this very first, very strict set of rules. So the really crucial part of verses 4 through 12 is seeing just how easily this impurity spreads to everyday objects and to other people if they don't respect some very careful boundaries. Imagine trying to navigate daily life in this bustling desert camp. If an unclean person sits somewhere and then you sit there, boom, you're unclean until evening. The text is literally spelling it out. Any bed he lies on, anything he sits on, even the saddle he uses for riding, all of it becomes unclean. And verse 8 has this really specific rule. If the man happens to spit on someone who is clean, that person has to go wash their clothes and bathe. Then there's verse 11, which gives us a super interesting detail about personal hygiene. If the man touches anyone without first rinsing his hands in water, that person becomes unclean until evening. It even affects inanimate objects. If he touches a porous clay pot, that pot absorbs the impurity and has to be physically broken. But if it's a solid wooden bowl, you just have to rinse it thoroughly with water. It's like a giant puzzle of boundaries.
So how do we resolve this? Verses 13 through 15 build a very precise step-by-step purification procedure for an abnormal male discharge. First, the man has to wait for the discharge to completely stop. He cannot even begin the process until the underlying health issue is resolved. Once it stops, he counts 7 full clear days for his ceremonial cleansing. After those 7 days, he must wash his clothes and bathe himself specifically in fresh, living water, which means running water, like a stream, not just a stagnant pool. Then the grand finale is on the 8th day. He takes 2 doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The priest sacrifices one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering to make atonement for him before the Lord.
On the flip side, let's look at verses 16 through 18. Here, we see the rule for a normal biological emission. Looking purely through the lens of the peshat, the simple, direct meaning of the text, this requires only bathing the entire body in water, washing any affected clothing or leather, and waiting until evening. That's it. Furthermore, verse 18 specifies that if a man lies with a woman and there is an emission of semen, both must bathe in water and they will be unclean until evening. Notice the stark contrast here. There is no 7-day waiting period and absolutely no sacrifices required. It's just a natural part of human biology, triggering a very temporary, single-day boundary. Section 3. Women's discharges.
Following the exact same logical structure we just saw for the men, the text brilliantly illustrates a parallel for women. It clearly distinguishes between a woman's regular 7-day monthly period, what the text simply calls her regular flow of blood in verse 19, and an abnormal discharge that occurs outside her cycle or continues beyond her normal period, which is detailed in verse 25. The text handles the regular, expected biology very differently from the irregular, prolonged condition. It's incredibly consistent.
Just like the men, strict boundaries apply during her regular period. According to verses 20 through 24, anything she lies on or sits on becomes unclean. If someone touches her bed or her chair, they've crossed that boundary. They must wash their clothes, bathe with water, and remain unclean until evening. And verse 24 outlines a really important point. If a man lies with her and her monthly flow touches him, he becomes unclean for 7 days, and any bed he lies on also becomes unclean. The text is deeply, deeply focused on mapping out and maintaining these physical boundaries to isolate the temporary state of impurity.
Now check out the exact symmetry here when we look at verses 25 through 30 regarding an abnormal or prolonged female discharge. A woman experiencing this condition must also wait for the flow to stop entirely. Once it stops, she counts 7 clear days of being clean. And then, exactly like the man with an abnormal discharge, she brings 2 doves or pigeon to the priest at the tent of meeting on the 8th day. The priest offers one as a sin offering and one as a burnt offering to make atonement for her before the Lord. It's a perfect parallel.
Section 4. Clarifications and key ideas. Okay, before we go any further, we absolutely have to clear something up because the terminology can trip people up. It is vital to understand that the word unclean, or Tamei in Hebrew, refers to a clinical, ritual status in this context. It is not a moral failure. It is definitely not a sin to have a normal bodily function. Uncleanness is simply a temporary state of ceremonial impurity that prevents an individual from approaching the holy tent of meeting or participating in sacred community rituals. It is purely about ritual readiness. It's about preparing oneself to encounter the holy.
This brings us to verse 31, and honestly, this is the theological climax of the entire chapter. It explicitly states the why behind all these meticulous rules. The verse reads, "You must keep the Israelites separate from things that make them unclean, so they will not die in their uncleanness for defiling my dwelling place, which is among them." Think about that. God's presence literally dwells in the physical center of the camp. These strict, detailed laws exist to protect that sacred space from being defiled by the uncontrollable, messy, mortal realities of human biology.
And just look at how beautifully structured this is. By using the exact same purification ritual, waiting 7 days, bringing 2 birds on the 8th day, for both men and women experiencing abnormal conditions, the text makes these strict rules remarkably equitable. There is no double standard in the ritual process for regaining access to the sanctuary. It's balanced, it's highly logical, and it was designed in a way that an ancient desert community could easily memorize and implement in their daily lives.
Section 5. Practical life lessons. So, what's the takeaway for us? What do these ancient laws about bodily fluids teach us practically today? First, this chapter demands an incredible level of mindfulness. I mean, it forced the ancient Israelites to pay microscopic attention to their biology. They had to know their bodies, track their cycles, recognize immediately when something was abnormal, and take radical responsibility for their physical state and how it affected others around them. Today, cultivating that kind of focused physical awareness is just as vital for our overall health and well-being.
Second, it teaches profound discipline and respect for boundaries. It constantly reminded the community that there is a distinct, non-negotiable separation between everyday messy human life and the absolute holiness of God. By physically managing what they touched, where they sat, and when they washed, they were mentally and spiritually training themselves every single day to revere the sacred. It's essentially daily spiritual training through physical habits.
Section 6, Chapter 15, Recap. Let's quickly wrap up everything we've unpacked. We walked step by step through the chapter, covering the 4 specific cases. First, male abnormal health discharges, which require a 7-day wait and an 8th-day sacrifice. Second, male normal emissions, requiring just a simple bathing and waiting until evening. Third, female normal monthly cycles, which set up a 7-day boundary period where impurity is transferred to beds and chairs. And fourth, female abnormal prolonged discharges, which mirror the men with a 7-day wait and an 8th-day sacrifice. We saw how easily impurity transfers to objects, and most importantly, we learned that all of this was carefully designed to protect the holiness of God's dwelling place right there in the center of the camp. I want to leave you with this thought to ponder.
In an age where we are so often disconnected from our own bodies and so easily distracted from the sacred, how can integrating this level of daily physical awareness help you build a more disciplined, intentional, and sacred life today? It's a real game changer if you think about it.
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.